that's when you realize, oh, this was the boldest thing you could be doing, to stick through it when it is tough, and to keep going. I'm someone who's worked in public service my entire career. I worked at City Hall. I worked on the ground in my community. I started a community center from the ground up during the pandemic.
Which is so cool.
And then later on in my career, I worked at the Lower East Side Girls Club in my district. And I worked with a lot of young people then, and some of whom, identified as LGBTQ, to really design programming and support for them, to really think about what career they wanted to go in, or how could they monetize that special skill or talent that they had. And so it's something I'm super passionate about. I'm really curious about opportunities for the city to provide training and support in e-commerce, and thinking about how to leverage the digital space for your business. I have experience doing that with young people. I worked in an after-school program where we provided entrepreneurship training to young people.
I really like you here talking about housing and healthcare and how it relates to queer communities. And of course it relates, like you say, to everybody. And of course we have the primary on June 24th, right?
Yes, June 24th.
June 24th.
Do your form of boldness every day. Don't let them stop you. The haters are always going to be there.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Life in Bold. My name is, of course, Ben Hawes, and I am your host of this fantastic podcast. And I have someone here who I deeply respect and admire, and someone who is really a politician, and someone who came to my door as a politician, which has actually never happened to me before in New York. And I was so taken, and she's running for city council. Right? You're running for city council.
I'm running for city council. When you do that, you do have to knock doors to meet people.
You do have to, yeah.
And I'm glad that I met you.
And you met me, and then I actually did a photo booth at one of your campaign events, your office opening, and I have just fallen in love with the fact that you're running. I've fallen in love with your messaging and what you've talked about, and I was actually just watching, I think this was a few days ago, a debate or kind of a town hall. Yeah, we have
we call them like forums.
Yeah, forum.
It makes it sound a little bit more casual than a debate.
And what's so cool is that you're running in my own district. And what we hear so often is that we have to get local. We have to think about like not just federal politics, but local politics. And I'm so excited to ask you about all of that, and like to just ask you kind of your positions, but also your background and all of who you are as a person. Everybody, welcome to the stage, Sarah Batchu.
Thank you so much.
I'm so excited to have you on the podcast.
I'm excited to be here. This is the first time I've done a podcast.
Ever?
I listen to a lot of them, but it's different being in the armchair, so to speak.
I know, exactly. Now, do you have any favorite podcasts?
I love a lot of the Crooked Media podcasts because I'm a political junkie. And so like we need to like straight line it in all the time.
Yeah.
I have been a big fan of a lot of NPR podcasts too, Planet Money.
Yeah.
I love Code Switch. That's another great
Code Switch.
As well.
I love podcasting. It's like my favorite thing to do aside from my stage performance where I do musical comedy and stuff like that. So if you're in District 2, I do a lot of musical comedy around the city, and it's very fun. But I would love to get into who you are as a person and kind of what you envision for District 2 of Manhattan, and I would love to just get into it. So one of the questions that I always start with my guests is around high school. And who you were in high school.
Oh, no.
And were you popular? Did you have friends? What kind of activities did you do? And what was your view in high school? What were you doing? What were you up to?
I was one of those kids who was really smart, but felt like the world was up against her. I in high school, I had definitely my crew of folks. I was in speech team and I was in theater.
Okay.
So it was a very unique crowd, probably not too different from the crowd that you had in high school, where we were all very outgoing and loved performance. But then I had this kind of brainy side of myself that was very into school, really into academics, really wanted to go, to a top college, and was very serious. And I think that made it hard sometimes to connect with people in the way that I wanted to, because there was so much going on up here.
Yeah.
But there was so much you can't vocalize as a kid, because kids really they zero in on the kid who is thinking really seriously and too hard, and they exploit that. So I was very guarded a lot. And so college is really where I opened up and was able to find who I was.
Oh, so tell us about college. So where did you go to college?
I went to Barnard College
Okay.
here in New York City. I thought I would never end up at a women's college. I actually really tried hard to not be there. I thought it would make my parents way too proud to see me in an all-women's environment for my education. But I really connected with a lot of the alums that I met when I was applying to college. And when I got in, they were so encouraging of Barnard is a place where the kind of guarded young person that I was could blossom.
Yeah.
And I really found that there.
Yeah. And how much was it being a women's college? How much did that play into that? Did you feel like it was a huge impact, or would you have had a similar experience somewhere else?
I think going to college for kids like me who felt like they wanted challenge and wanted to focus on academics, that experience will really open you up for sure.
Yeah.
But for me, going to a women's college made all the difference because having the opportunity to be in an environment where everyone was a smart young woman. We had, folks who were also, transgender siblings. And that was, beautiful too, because we had the opportunity to remove ourselves from an environment where many of us had, been ashamed of who we were and ashamed of loving school and wanting to engage in debate and dialogue. And so Barnard really provided me that opportunity to specifically grow into the woman I wanted to become.
I think that's so cool. My mom is a technology teacher in California, and she hosts a girl camp where she teaches robotics to girls in like 7th, 8th grade. And I've learned so much about women in education and girls in classrooms and stuff, and how much men are more likely to just raise their hand and say anything, and women are sometimes a little bit more thoughtful and just a little bit more like reserved to raise their hand. And even if they're not, the men are just bombarding and just kind of raising their hands and stuff.
A lot of it has to do with perfectionism. There's a lot of young women who are socialized, and even my friends, who were trans men later on, in their adolescence, said, even for them, it was hard to break out of the shell of wanting the answer to be perfect before saying anything. And that's, what I think keeps a lot of women from being able to advance, whether it's in their career, even in your personal life, because you're not able to name exactly what you want to see or do, what you need from a partner, what you need from friends.
Yeah. I have noticed that, especially as an extroverted man. I'm
like, you say it like a disease or like some sort of
I was diagnosed
label.
with extrovert. But like I do find myself having to kind of pull back a little bit or hold off for a few seconds before I say something in a group setting, because I try to be aware that like I am one of those people who would just raise my, I'm a performer, I'm a podcaster, like I love my voice, and I will just totally raise my hand. So typically I will try to hold back and just kind of wait. But one of the things that I loved about your forum that I was just watching is you really stood up. Like you really were like, you were first to speak, and you go, okay, and you stand up, and then the second person stands up, and then they go, oh, you guys should not stand up. And then Anthony Weiner was standing up the whole time.
Yikes. Let's talk about the fact that I'm running against Anthony Weiner.
And your face, of course, you're professional and everything like that, but I was just like, oh, I wonder what she's thinking. And a lot of the things that he's saying, are very, very politician-y to me. They're very, he wants you to think that he's thinking different, and that, of course, he's like gotten over his scandal and all of those stuff. But can we talk a little bit about the people you're running against and like the race itself and what you see as your competitive advantage or your unique selling proposition, or however you decide to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about the community that I'm running to represent. Yeah. I'm running for District 2. Most people don't know necessarily what District 2 is.
Yeah.
District 2 goes from 33rd Street at its highest point all the way down to Delancey Street. At its lowest point, from the East River to 6th Avenue is the furthest west we go. And of course, it's a little jigsaw puzzle on the edges, as we often see in a gerrymandered map.
Right.
But it's a beautiful district. It's at the center of a lot of very big challenges in New York City, from educational equity to climate change and resilience to just economic inequality. We have Gramercy Park, and then we have tens of thousands of residents who live in public housing along the waterfront. And so it's a district that is very diverse. And I've always thought if you find solutions that work here, you find solutions that work for New York City, because it really is all walks of life that I'm running to represent. And, you know, our race has a lot of really phenomenal and highly qualified people running for it. We're lucky to come you know, in a district that has so many people who are interested in running to represent it. I come to this work having been very rooted in this community. I have worked on political campaigns over the years in this community. I actually came to this community first while working on our current councilwoman's campaign in 2017. And I fell in love. I'd always been a West Sider, and I finally found myself on the East Side, meeting all the quirky people of the East Village and Lower East Side, and thinking, these people are weird.
It's the coolest place in the world.
But yeah, I love them. They're the coolest people, and they're folks that I wouldn't have met otherwise. And I think that's what's beautiful about New York, that we have so many different people that we're able to connect with in very unexpected places. And so for me, the unexpected place was the East Side. So I started getting involved here. I joined a local organization. I was on their board. I was able to get a job and to move to this community and serve on our community board. And I had the opportunity to decide, as our councilwoman was retiring from her position, she was term limited. To decide,
oh no, that's interesting. I actually
we have
didn't
term
know that.
limits. It's a great thing, but it can be challenging for women, right? Because we spend all this time and energy electing a woman. It's very hard to get a woman elected. I'm sure we'll talk about that. And then, you know, she has to give up. Well, we can. But then you have to give up your role after 2 terms in city council, or in this case 3 terms, but the total is 8 years. And so you know, thinking about where our city was at that moment, the mayor had just announced these super devastating budget cuts. And I had decided that the approach that I was seeing at City Hall was not the approach that was going to get us out of the tough times that we were experiencing. The humanitarian crisis that we're facing as people from all over the world are coming to New York City and not under the greatest of circumstances. The fact that we have a mental health crisis, we've had, you know, a persistent and deepening homelessness and housing crisis in New York City. And these types of cuts that the mayor was proposing when I decided to get into this race were going to be devastating. And so I felt like I have something unique to offer. I'm someone who's worked in public service my entire career. I worked at City Hall. I worked on the ground in my community. I started a community center from the ground up during the pandemic.
Which is so cool.
And we had the opportunity to get in there. And so I'm lucky, I think, as somebody who brings actual city government experience. I'm the only one besides Anthony Weiner who does. I think it's a moment when people like me can step up and really fix what's broken.
I think so too. I think that it's such a cool thing that you're running, and that, you know, when you came to my door and you were just able to just say, this is what I'm doing, and it just shows that you care. I think to me, it just, you know, Anthony Weiner didn't come to my door.
Not yet. But if he does, you can say if you're uncomfortable and that if he should leave, don't be afraid.
And you're also running against Harvey Epstein, which is I've seen the posters for so many years. And to be honest with you, the very little that I know about him is his name.
Sure.
And that he has that name, and I think that there
his
was
parents
the SNL.
Didn't know it was going to be a bad name
His
when they
parents
named
didn't
him
know.
that.
And there was that. Do you know the SNL sketch?
I do
about
know the
it?
SNL sketch.
Can you tell me more about him? Like, what should I know about him from the perspective of this area and your campaign and all of that?
Assemblymember Epstein has been a great public servant for our community. He is somebody who's done a lot of work on tenant rights in particular, both as a lawyer outside of the, you know, political system, as well as within the political system. He's helped pass, you know, really big pieces of legislation in Albany. And that's why I say, keep doing what you're doing. We love you in Albany. A lot of people don't like Albany. Stay there. Do what you're doing. Do more of it. When it comes to tenant rights, the biggest things that we can do for New Yorkers often happen in Albany. And so having an expert like that in that seat really does help our community the most. And the other thing, we talked about term limits a moment ago. City Council has them. Albany and the state legislature does not. And so what that means is when we have really amazing folks serving us, it's to our benefit to keep having them there, because the more that they're there, the more power they accrue and the more they can do for us, the constituents. And so, you know, we worked so hard to get him elected there. I would love to see him continue in his role and really to see the next generation of leadership in city council. And so that's part of why I'm running, why I think I have something unique to offer. I have the experience rooted in city government. And I think it's time, you know, to welcome the next generation, and ideally a woman of color, because that's who's represented this district for the last three city council women.
Yeah, I think that's so cool. And like, you're so right. Like women of color are just like ultimately get so much done, and like just like are so beneficial to the country, to the state, to the city, to our district, and make up a lot of the citizenship, you know. And I think it's just so I think it's so fantastic that you're running. And I would love to talk about housing, because you came to my door and you mentioned housing and healthcare. I would love to talk about those two things, and specifically around really who they help the most, those causes, who they help the most, what are the biggest tasks and activities that need to be done, and what will be the impact, really. I feel that you've mentioned a lot around the hospital that is closing.
It has closed.
And
yes,
and that's something you deeply care about. And I would love to know, you know, is the healthcare cause around coverage? Is it around, you know, the infrastructure, like around healthcare, or is it really just all of it? Like, talk about it.
All of it. I mean, who does housing and healthcare help? It helps all of us. But the problem right now is most of these systems work for the privilege and the advantage. When it comes to housing in New York City, you could make any amount of money and struggle to find housing. But if you make the most money, you're probably set. And so for me, my agenda when it comes to housing is making sure that New York City is a place where anybody can make it, where anybody can call this city their home, because that's what's made New York City what it is. We make the city. And so I've been a huge advocate for making sure that we not only preserve the affordable housing we have, but also fight to build new homes, because that's one of the challenges we face. It's very basic economics. We probably all learned it in a 101 class.
But not everybody.
But so to break it down, because you know, I didn't get past 101 in economics, but they did cover this. To break it down, when we have more housing, right? When the supply of housing goes up, we are able, and let's say demand is not as high as supply, right? We have options, right? And so we see price go down. But right now, the reality in New York is the opposite, right? We have a shortage of housing. Our demand exceeds what we have in terms of supply. And so the price is up. The basic premise that I'm describing has been tested out. We had COVID, for instance. During COVID, many of us were able to find really great deals on housing. It was pretty awesome, because a lot of people left the city, and those of us that stayed had a huge amount of apartments to choose from, and the landlords were freaking out. What are we going to do?
I negotiated my rent on this place down during the pandemic. Like, just I stayed where I was, but I just said I might move, and you know, can you do this price? And they were like,
And you know, have you been able to do that since?
No.
And so that's what I'm saying.
I sure haven't.
The landlord should be fighting for our business. We shouldn't be fighting each other to get a great apartment in New York City. And so part of that means, you know, we don't want to kick people out of New York. We want to bring more people in, but we're going to need the housing to actually make sure that folks have somewhere to be and to live in New York City. And when it comes to healthcare, I think it goes hand in hand. Once you have, you know, a place to lie your head down at night, you need your health. Health is wealth in a lot of ways. And unfortunately, again, when it comes to healthcare, the most advantaged are the ones who get the right to be healthy in our healthcare system in this country. And so in our city, we benefit from the deregulation of the hospital industry. That's what they want us to believe, that, you know, back in the day, there were a lot more controls over pricing in healthcare in New York State. And, you know, since the last few decades, we've seen the deregulation of the hospital system. Our hospitals are all nonprofits, but unfortunately, the incentives of healthcare are corporate incentives. It is really to cost cut, to eliminate waste. And waste in the healthcare system's mind is like the extra 5-10 minutes you get with your doctor just to have a conversation, you know, before you get a pap smear. And it can be really dehumanizing for people.
Absolutely.
The way that the system is set up. And so when it comes to our local hospital, which is Mount Sinai Beth Israel, it was run by Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai bought it 10 years ago. And Mount Sinai has operated it like a business. And they've seen, the folks that live in this community that utilize this hospital, they're on Medicaid. They have a lot of needs, and we don't get a great reimbursement rate for serving them. And they've decided over the years, we're going to cut this service or that department until the hospital became a failing hospital. And then they said, that's a failing hospital. We're going to close it. And so, you know, I've been on the front lines of fighting that. I know we spoke about it when we first met. Unfortunately, since then, our lawsuit to stop the closure has not been able to move forward. There's nothing left in the hospital to save because they closed down the services. They moved staff or let staff go.
Like all the equipment and everything is gone. And
everything was gone. There was no service happening. And so even though we had to stay in the courts, there was nothing left to stay. And I think, you know, it's not an isolated incident. We've seen this happen time and again in New York City and New York State and across the country. I've seen it in my own family. I grew up in a family of healthcare providers. My mother, when she left her private practice, actually went into healthcare administration. And I saw the beginning of this in her career, where every hospital she'd go to, her role would be eliminated. And it happened over and over and over again until she had to retire, even though she enjoyed working in healthcare. And we see it as patients, right? Our favorite doctor or the place that we went to that we got the best care. It's never around for that long.
What did your mom do with her private practice?
So my mom, like a lot of people who became physicians, you know, she finished medical school, started residency in the 70s, the 80s. You know, she started a private practice like many people did then. She was a primary care physician, as was my father. They both were primary care physicians in the town that I grew up in outside of Chicago. And what happened as my mom was going through her career is the business side of healthcare became very overwhelming. And took up a lot of her time, such that she wasn't able to take care of her patients in the way that she wanted to. And it became so much to administer a private practice, a business really, that she decided it wasn't worth it, right? The costs were really high. You know, we had big players getting into the space because of consolidation that was happening in the healthcare industry. And so she had to sell her practice really to be able to live a, you know, stress-free or a little less stressed life. And, you know, ended up going into administration where, you know, she continued to see those trends impact whole healthcare systems.
You bringing up business, and I would love to chat about business as well. And like, you know, one of the things that I loved about Kamala Harris and like her big campaign for president was that she talked about opportunity economy. And I just like the word opportunity economy, to be honest. Like I just like, I remember that she would say, okay, we're going to do this around housing. We're going to, you know, there was a plan, but like, I like the idea of the economy having anything to do with opportunity. You know what I mean? And I'm a business owner. I have my photo booth business. And I also basically run the business of my comedy and my performance. And ultimately, I want that to be my full-time thing one day, as an artist, as a performer, as a musician, and all of that. But right now, I'm really focused on, I would like for the economy to be good, you know, so that my business can do well, because I recently in 2024 lost a job where I was selling training. So my company was a New York based company, and we sold leadership training and management training to companies essentially. And that's what my professional background is in like management training and things like that. And also just like employee engagement, culture, events and stuff like that. But you know, when I got laid off in 2020, because I worked at ClassPass. Do you know ClassPass?
Of course.
And, you know, that was a company that was full of gyms, and all gyms closed in the pandemic. So they really had to let people go. And then the company that I was working for that was training, we just noticed a total decrease in spending from companies being able to buy training and invest in training. And now, you know, my ideal customer for my photo booth is companies, and a photo booth is just a total nice to have, you know? And so what I would love to ask you is like, how can your role as a city council person impact the local economy?
I think in local government, we tend to think about the impact on the, economic output of the city in large terms, like very big terms when it comes to economic development. What industries are thriving here? How are we supporting the fashion industry or the professional services and, financial services industry? Or how are we shaping, the creative industries that are here in New York City? And I think, all of that is grand vision. When it comes to city council member, we like roll up our sleeves and we start talking about retail, small business, restaurants, bars, especially in this neighborhood. Hospitality is a huge piece of the economic development that we support. And I think, the piece that's changing before our eyes is businesses like yours, right? Where there is no brick and mortar piece of it. It is traveling. It is virtual. It is in person. It's in between. I think there's a lot of businesses that exist that way, especially since the pandemic, because folks realized we don't have to lease space to have a business, right? We can do things through e-commerce, or we can have, a virtual setup, for meetings and calls and things like that. And so in a lot of ways, I think government has not yet realized how we support that. The conversation, we just did a forum, another forum. Not debate, forum.
Not a debate, but a forum.
A debate hopefully will come at some point, but right now forum.
That'd be so fun.
Our forum was hosted by a local organization, the East Village Independent Merchants Association. And that's an organization that really supports the local businesses in the East Village. And almost all of them are brick and mortar businesses. And so in that conversation, people were asking, how can we support folks who have realized they can't get a lease in this community anymore?
Oh my gosh,
And most of the conversation really focused on, well, how can we make it more affordable to rent space? I'm really curious about opportunities for the city to provide training and support in e-commerce and thinking about how to leverage the digital space for your business. I have experience doing that with young people. I worked in an after-school program where we provided entrepreneurship training to young people. And I think it's a space that a lot of people don't fully know how to leverage, especially older generations that haven't had to. And so I'd love to see the city not just invest in grants and support, commercial lease negotiation support for a physical space, but also to think about when it comes to the digital, how can we help people with the skill sets they need and the training, and maybe even help negotiate some deals for them to get, access to subsidized resources to run their business online. I think those are the types of ideas that when you have people our age actually in government, they're thinking about that and not thinking about it in just, one way. We need the brick and mortar, but we also know that not all business is happening that way.
And I think also, there's a coffee shop that opened across the street. It's actually an interesting coffee shop because it has been many coffee shops in the last 10 years that I've lived here. But they really decorated, really well in there. It's right across the street. And I have thought, I should go work there, or it's a small space, but you could have one or two people working there. And I think it's really interesting around innovation, just kind of this idea that maybe not every business is going to be a classic brick and mortar, but maybe it's a workspace or an entertainment space, or somewhere that people can go and have a coffee and a piece of cake and whatever, but I often have a fantasy that some mayor
maybe not this mayor
would give me the right to just design this exact street for this, which I won't say exactly where I am, but I love the idea of having these coffee shops, and I really do have a dream street. I have a really awesome street to live on, but I do think a lot about what is the future of the brick and mortar, because there's so many businesses that you could open, but at the same time, it is changing, and things do change and all of that. But can we talk about one of the things that's really important to me is, and you've mentioned a couple of times already, but really protections around trans people and queer people. I think that there's such an attack, obviously, and we see it so federally, but some of my trans friends are seeing, on the train or out and about, that there's just an uptick of harm and harassment and stuff like that. And where do you see your role? Like, where do you see yourself being a leader in that? Or where do you see yourself helping to create policies or helping to create influence around that? Because I know it's something that's important to you.
Yeah, I've throughout my career, I've worked with LGBTQ young people in particular. When I worked at City Hall, I had a focus on increasing employment for young people. And one of the groups of young people we were really interested in was LGBTQ young people, particularly those that we would call them, I know you love the word opportunity, we would call them opportunity youth. So youth who were out of school or out of work, but who could really benefit from the additional investment. And oftentimes maybe we're experiencing homelessness or, you know, other types of challenges to getting employment. And so I, you know, did focus groups at amazing organizations like Hetrick Martin Institute, like Ali Forney, which is uptown. And I had an amazing time listening to the young people and really understanding what their life experience is like, trying to seek these opportunities, and realize by and large the main thing a lot of them needed was housing, which is
That's very true.
A huge piece of what I've focused on throughout my career.
Right.
And then later on in my career, I worked at the Lower East Side Girls Club in my district, and I worked with a lot of young people then, and some of whom, you know, identified as LGBTQ, to really design programming and support for them, to really think about what career they wanted to go in, or how could they monetize that special skill or talent that they had. And so it's something I'm super passionate about. I think at this moment, like so many issues, we're playing defense. We don't get to envision the future we want to see. And I think that that's really hard. It's really draining. We all have to take care through that moment. But it's why someone like me steps up to help lead and to help support as an ally in this very difficult moment. I think, you know, most important in front of mind for me is making sure that the young people that I've had the opportunity to work with, as well as young people throughout the city, continue to get gender-affirming care. That's been something that we've seen under attack. The, once again, nonprofit hospitals that act like for-profit corporations have been concerned about the liabilities that they'll face for providing this care. But this care is essential care. It's life-saving care. And we know that young people will be harmed if they don't get that care. And so I'm really excited to see the city, particularly our public hospital system, New York City Health and Hospitals, really step up to fill that gap. And as council member, I would make sure they have the full resources and protection they need to keep providing that care, because we might not see that coming from other folks. And so that's top of mind for me, making sure that we don't get distracted by the right, because they're going to focus very specific, narrow focus on, you know, trans girls in sports, which I absolutely support. But it's a very, very small percentage of people. And we know that there's a lot of other issues that are much more, you know, far-reaching for the community. So I want to make sure that as a council member, I'm speaking to the really big issues that folks have top of mind. And we're not seeing that as we should across the country. It's been such a focus, even here in New York City, on the really, really small items, and it's a distraction. It's
a distraction, and it's such a fear tactic, and just a way to create a conversation, because, you know, trans people in bathrooms and trans people in sports, it's just such a like a topic that people grab onto it. And I've noticed in my own conversations with my progressive friends, you know, and they say, oh, but I don't know if trans people should be able to be on the sports team of, you know, whatever. And I'm like, well, even if that's what you think, like, of course I don't agree with that, but like, if you think that, it should not be in your top 100 priorities. That's kind of how I say it.
No, for sure, like, for sure.
Politically, there's so much happening. Globally, there's so much happening. In the city, there's so much happening. And like, if you feel that this is how you feel about trans people in sports, like, I disagree with you. And why are we even talking about this? There's like 6 people, you know what I mean? Like, it's like,
absolutely.
and trans people in bathrooms, you know, it's just such a twisted conversation, because we're not talking about, you know, it's such a small issue. And what you're really worried about is that someone's going to hurt your child. So let's talk about what people do to hurt children. Do you know what I mean? Like,
absolutely. I mean, I've been freaked out by some of the proposed policies that are, you know, going to ban children from using the bathroom that is consistent with their gender. What are you going to do? Are you gonna like lift up their pants or the dress and check? Like it, you know, that is the type of thing I'm actually concerned about. If there are people who feel the need to check those types of things, that is a problem.
And also, I love a TikTok with a trans man, you know, someone who they're saying should go into the women's bathroom, and they, you know, it's someone who's a man. You know? And
they're not going to be in there. They want to go to the other one.
But also, like, they're, you know, they have they're big and muscular, and they have a short hair and like classically man things, and you're like, they're like, you want me to go into the women's bathroom? Like, that's going to freak out your daughter more than anything. Absolutely. You know what I mean? And so I just feel, you know, it's just, I really like you here talking about housing and healthcare and how it relates to queer communities. And of course it relates, like you say, to everybody. I'm curious, you know, can I ask a stupid question?
I
and
think
of course,
so.
Of course I am. Of course I'm a smart person, but I would love, you know, I love asking questions for people that might not understand maybe what is a city councilwoman or
That's
a city council
question.
person.
That is not a stupid question. That is a good question.
I'd love to just walk through the job description, walk through the powers and the policies and all of that. And of course, we have the primary on June 24th, right?
Yes, June 24th.
June 24th, and we have to all go out and vote.
And you can even start June 14th.
June 14th.
We have early voting.
Early voting, which is fantastic. And then you can already register, right? And so now what is a city council person? What do they do?
This is a very good question.
Yes, and really, like, what is your vision for how you would spend your time?
Absolutely. So the city council member has a few key priorities and issues, but I'll start with saying that we have three branches of government, right? We have the executive, we have the judiciary, and we have the legislative. And we have this at all levels of government, city, state, and federal in the country. Just brush up on U.S. history and U.S. Gov. In New York City, our city council is our legislative branch. Our mayor is our executive branch, and our court system is our judicial branch. The issues that we see in city council are very focused on oversight over the mayor's administration and his executive powers. It's negotiating the budget and how we spend money in New York City, which is done, you know, in concert with the mayor's office, and sometimes in opposition when there are different budding priorities. And then the last piece is really oversight as well as land use. When we have the opportunity to rezone or alter a community, whether it's an individual building or an entire neighborhood, all of that has to go through city council. And so when you talked about earlier the opportunity to really reimagine what a street could look like, we do that when we have a neighborhood rezoning. We have workshops where people get to pick up some crayons or some markers and they get to draw what they want to see in their community. And that is, you know, a type of data that we collect. It is a way that we hear from the community what they want to see. And so as city council member, for me, one of the biggest reasons I got in, as I mentioned earlier, was the budget. I felt like the decisions we were making with our budget were not the right decisions. I know, as somebody who's worked in and out of government, what we spend our money on and what's most impactful. I actually started my career in city government working on pilot programs that the city had never done before, but wanted to try and was really piloting with private dollars, usually philanthropy or a corporate sponsor. And we were really testing, will this approach work? So whether it was a new approach to mental health or was it a new approach to immigration services. And when we evaluated and found successful approaches, we actually convinced the city, hey, fund this. So I have a lot of experience saying, hey, fund this thing that really works. And I'll say right now, we're not funding the things that work. So many critical programs to address the mental health crisis, so many programs we could be using to serve our newly arrived New Yorkers, they're not being implemented. And when we utilize programs that don't work, or when we cut programs that do, that leads to more cost for New Yorkers. We see the bill in other ways down the line. And so that's a big reason I decided to jump in. I think, you know, when it comes to issues like housing, I wanted to make sure that I was somebody who could be supportive supportive of creating more housing, especially in parts of this city that haven't contributed because of residential segregation, because of redlining, because of discriminatory zoning practices.
Yeah.
And so being able to be a yes vote to projects that really matter, that could really bring more families to New York City, or keep families in New York City for that matter. And so those are really, you know, important pieces. I think thinking about whoever comes next as our mayor, whether it's this one, hopefully not, or, you know, someone else, the oversight piece is also very critical. We need to make sure that we don't repeat the mistakes that we have been seeing over the last 3 years under this mayor's administration.
Now, I have a fun icebreaker question.
Yes.
What's your favorite program that currently exists, and what's your like pet peeve, like program that you just think doesn't work and we need to just kind of like switch it out or get something new?
Sure. So my favorite program is we call it a model, and it is called the Clubhouse model.
Okay.
It is basically a community center that is specifically designed for people who have mental health challenges, whether it's schizophrenia or, you know, severe cases of bipolar disorder, other types of mental health challenges. It's a place they can go during the day for services, for support, for healthcare.
Yeah.
It's a proven model for helping people manage these very complex challenges that they're facing. And oftentimes the people that do go to these spaces are people experiencing homelessness or other barriers to, you know, economic well-being.
Yeah.
And so having a space where they not only receive healthcare, but they receive social support.
Yeah, right.
And camaraderie with other people who are going through what they're going through. It's a great program. It's one that the mayor did a very strange thing of cutting funding from several places and then like putting more funding in a few.
Yeah.
The reality is like we need these in more communities.
Yeah.
There's a lot of communities that could benefit from having a focused space for people who live in that community or who are connected to that community to get care and to get support. And so it's one that I absolutely, you know, would want to continue to fight for that funding and that support and expand as a model. I think, you know, when it comes to programs that don't work, I'm going to go for a policy.
Okay.
So right now in New York City, we have something called the right to shelter law.
Okay,
It's not a law, sorry. It's a consent decree.
I've heard of this.
Yes. So we are the only city in the country where anybody can come and they can get shelter.
Yeah.
And it's actually a pretty amazing thing. People always talk about how New York City has so many homeless people, so many unhoused people. But the reality in New York City is traditionally most of those people have been in shelter. So thinking back, you know, before the pandemic, you know, we had 50, 60,000 people who were unhoused. But most of that, like 95% of that, was people who were in shelter. And if you're a family in New York City, thanks to a lawsuit several decades ago, you actually get an apartment if you're living in shelter, or like a suite style shelter. So it's actually a system whereby a lot of people, while they may be in temporary housing, they are housed in some way. Since we've started to see the humanitarian crisis and asylum seekers and newly arrived New Yorkers, we have had a challenge to the shelter system and that right to shelter. There, you know, the numbers have gone down in the last year, but initially there was a lot of folks coming here, and the city kind of was backlogged in addressing, you know, how do we house them? And so the mayor made a choice, and I think it was the wrong choice, which was we're going to evict people from shelter. And it ultimately ended up being that he evicted individuals every 30 days and families every 60 days if they were part of the newly arrived New Yorkers group. And what I feel that this policy really did is it drove a wedge between many long-standing New Yorkers and folks who were coming to New York, you know, 3 days ago versus 30 years ago. And the reality is, like, we're all from somewhere else, especially in New York City. And that kind of division is unproductive to me. It's not New York. It doesn't align with our values. But I think more importantly, you know, beyond values, it doesn't make sense. When you think about the economic impact, when you think about what we're going to see down the line. We are seeing the impact of people not having housing. They're sleeping in the streets, right? We're seeing, you know, young kids with moms who are selling, you know, candy and food in the subway system. And nobody feels good about that.
Yeah.
Those people don't feel good about that. And we, the people who are watching that happen, don't feel good about that. And so for me, I've, been a huge advocate for making sure that we don't kick people out of shelter. We help them get work authorizations. We help them, get status in this country so that they can move out of shelter and get their own home. Providing rental assistance, helping them subsidize the cost of housing, because shelter is actually expensive, but giving someone a voucher and saying, hey, get an apartment with this is actually not that expensive.
Can we talk a little bit about boldness and the topic of boldness? We're on this podcast, Life in Bold. And just to give you a little bit of background on the podcast, I started the podcast as, it was called Side Hustle Divas.
Okay. That's a great name too.
Thank you. I like naming things. I like branding. Sure. And it was called Side Hustle Divas because I just have a series of side hustles and projects and stuff. And I love talking about business, and I love talking about ideas, and I love talking about how to get more customers and, how to run for office and things like that. But I had a friend's dad who called me and he was like, this isn't your podcast. You need to talk more about like what mean things that are more meaningful to you, and talk more about yourself. And, you are someone who, when you're at a party, you're not talking about how to get more customers. You're talking about your life and your projects and your dreams and all of that. And so I do really like the word opportunity. And I like thinking about how I can build a life for myself that is more bold, and how I can go into, we talk about mental health, and like, even, of course, there's a mental health crisis, but even just access to like therapy and just kind of like being able to dig deeper and have a fulfilling life, on the hierarchy of needs, there's just like so much that's up at the top around like just being able to really have a fulfilling and happy life as well, and like prosperous and things like that. And so, I have big dreams as a person, and I like talking to people about their dreams and talking to people about what they would like to accomplish in life and how they would like to go about it. And the way that I've found to have those conversations is around boldness and what the word boldness means to them. So I would love to know what boldness means to you.
I think boldness means doing the unexpected, doing something that hasn't been seen before, whether you haven't seen it personally or other people haven't seen it personally. I think it's about courage and bravery and strength. And oftentimes I think all of those things like happen maybe unexpectedly for someone.
I think that's so true. And like, and it's something that no one has ever said on this podcast, doing something unexpected or doing something that hasn't been seen.
For not being unexpected.
Original answer to what does boldness mean. But it does have a lot to do around courage, and it has a lot to do around being able to go after what you're looking for. And I think, when it comes to government, there's so much that we have to do to make sure everybody's protected, right? And there's so much that we have to do to make sure people have housing and healthcare. And it's such a gap because, of course, like so many people don't. It's hard to access. The hospital closed. I mean, that's a big deal.
Absolutely.
And then, what we really, back to like Obama days, just kind of like hope and change and kind of like live. I have a tattoo that says "Live the life you've imagined," and it's a quote that I really like since I was a senior in high school, and I put it as my senior quote. I had to say that because the second I said senior in high school, everybody's gonna know it's my senior quote. But like, I just think a lot about like how can we really rise up, and how can we make sure that business owners are getting what they need and all of that. But like what you talk about with the policies and with the decisions that are being made and things like that, it really starting to make sense to me. So I think this is a really good conversation, because I think that people out there who are listening, who might be artists or who might be people who are business owners or students or, just people who are trying to make a life for themselves, or they just have a job and they just do what they're doing.
Yeah, you could just have a job. That's
cool
too. I mean, it's like not as cool as being an artist, but
exactly. But I think my question really is around getting involved as well. How can people get involved? Not just with campaigns, but like if I live here in the East Village and I want to be a more active member of the community, does it start by going to community forums? Does it start by volunteering for campaigns? Like, where would you recommend someone like me gets more involved who has things that I care about?
Yes to all. Yeah. I think what's challenging in politics, and even the adjacent spaces of government, of policy, of advocacy, is there is the unspoken and spoken sense that you have to wait in line or you have to wait for someone to activate you.
Yeah.
You are not going to be activated. Like, there is nobody who's going to come and press the button and like say, okay, now come to life, you know? You have to get out there and you have to make those opportunities in a lot of ways. Because we live in a place like New York City where we believe so much in democracy, that we have so many layers of it, there's a lot of places that you can start. You know, one place a lot of people start in their neighborhood in New York City is your local community board. There are 59 community boards, not to be confused with city council. A community board represents a district different than a city council district, because we just have to have different lines for everything. 51 council members, 59 community districts. And your community board is basically a group of 50 people who should be representative of your community. And when government goes through certain processes, whether it's you know, planning a traffic calming measure and, you know, your street outside your window, or it's a local business that wants to get a liquor license, you are part of a group of people that get to say what you think about this new measure. And you do that through a formal resolution process that you give back to the city and say, here, this is our feedback. This is what we think of what you're doing. And it's a great opportunity to be exposed to everything that's happening in your community, whether it's transportation, whether it's small business, whether it's arts and culture. You have that opportunity to really know what's going on and what's up. But at the same time, it is a space that typically has been reserved for long-standing community members, you know, people who are born and bred in the area, or people who have been living there for decades. And it can be really hard, especially in New York City and Manhattan in particular. Is a place with a lot of transplants. So it can be really challenging to find your footing in those types of spaces. But it's a space I encourage people to go to, even just to attend. You don't have to be a part of the board right away, but just to go and hear, what are the issues that are happening this month in my community? And it's a place that I certainly, you know, got to know more of my community. When I worked in government, I had the opportunity to visit a lot of these other community boards outside of where I live to really understand, when we were proposing projects, what people wanted to see. I think people also, you know, can do what I did as well, where you find a candidate who really resonates with you and you say, like, hey, you know, do you have a volunteer opportunity? Do you have an internship? You know, I just decided to like make myself the deputy campaign manager on the first race that I worked in this neighborhood. And I did that just by showing up. And then one day I was like, hey, can I have this title? Because I'm the one like coming here every day and doing this other job after my day job. And I was really lucky enough to have a group of people who really mentored and supported me to really learn and understand the community I was living in. And I think that's always my biggest fear, that people like us who come to the neighborhood, we move in, we want to stay, we're probably going to get priced out. We never get that opportunity to actually connect in an authentic way with the place that we're living in. And, you know, when we talk about gentrification or other, you know, big words like that, that's really where it comes from. People move to a neighborhood and they don't engage or don't build those roots where they don't know each other. That's the worst part of gentrification. That is when you see true displacement, because there isn't an opportunity for, you know, equitable and inclusive development and advancement, which I do think can come from, you know, even newcomers coming to a neighborhood and helping invest time and sweat equity as people have done before them. And so I always encourage people, find that space. Our community is, you know, we have community gardens, we have the community board, we have a lot of civic organizations, we have people who clean up the park on Saturdays. We have people who are small business entrepreneurs that set up a table, you know, outside on the street over the weekend. And so whatever way that looks like for you to be connected to the place you're in, take the risk and show up and try it.
I love that. I think that's so true. And I think that sometimes you're right. No one's going to come and tap you and be like, come on. I mean, sometimes they will, like you, you do that. But like, I feel like I sometimes I think, oh, but I don't know if I'm qualified, or like, I don't know if I'm somehow like allowed to do this or whatever, but I am, you know, and I can help, and I should really be more of a part of what I'm doing and the place that I live. Okay. Can we end on another icebreaker question, which is, what is one of the funniest moments that have happened on your campaign so far? And then what is a moment that required some courage?
Oh man, I'm like brain freeze
I
from the
know.
smoothie I just had.
That's a funny moment.
Funniest moment. Okay, this is a very small one.
Yes.
I was at the farmers market in Tompkins Square Park, which I'm at
So
many
great.
Sundays.
Yeah, of course. Great place
And
to campaign.
It's a great place to campaign.
But it's also a great place to be.
It's a great place to be too. I look forward to a quiet Sunday sometime in the future when I'll be there to actually buy produce.
Right.
But I was there, earlier this year, and we have a pop-up banner that is just a giant me. It is like me from here to here, and it has all the neighborhoods I represent. It has my logo really big. The thing is like 7 feet tall. It's
Yes,
bigger
I've seen
than
it.
I am. Yes, you've seen it in my office. It's quite large. I thought they were showing us like the actual size when we ordered it. I did not realize that was not drawn to scale. But I digress. So we have this, big banner. I'm handing out lit. I'm, meeting folks. I'm, having the opportunity, to meet folks who knew me already, which was really cool.
Yeah.
And then I'm trying to give a piece of literature to this guy who's trying to cross the street. He's in a hurry. And he just shouts, "I love Sarah Batchu." And I was like, I don't know who this man is. And like, does my husband know about him?
Yeah.
And then I'm like, he's familiar with me. He's seen me somewhere. And I'm like, I'm Sarah Batchu. Do you know I'm Sarah Batchu? And he's like, I love you. And I'm just like, okay.
That's
like
so
this,
funny.
I wasn't expecting this, but it's like, our name recognition is going up.
Yes,
it sounds like
it is. No,
yeah.
you have the good posters. You're around. I remember there was somebody that was running for a position back in 2020 or something, and I had seen him, around, and then he was out at Tompkins Square Park, and
we all go there.
Yes, exactly. And I was like, oh
Guilty.
my God, you're the guy. It's so funny. And I just had a moment last night. I did for my photo booth. I did it's kind of a holiday party, but they do it in April.
Okay.
And it was at the Comedy Cellar, which is so cool and iconic. And as a comedian, you just like to be in the space and stuff. And I don't know if some people have seen my videos or something like that, but I think I also might just have a face. I'm wearing the sequins. I think there were a few comedians who go, "Hey, how's it going?" And I'm like, do you know who I am? Or like, what's going on? Like, it's kind of a weird feeling.
You got politicians.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, that's like every politician I know. They talk to every person that way because they don't remember who they know.
Yes, exactly.
And I think maybe they know your stuff, but I think
I also look like they should know me. That's what I'm telling myself.
You have that look.
Yeah.
You have that look. I agree.
Okay, so what's a moment that took some courage, and then we'll wrap it up.
A moment that took courage. Brain freeze again. Brain freeze again.
Take your time. Because the whole thing really takes courage.
Well, that's where I was going to go with this. I was going to say, the courage, it often comes from showing up day in and day out. For anyone who's ever gone through really tough mental health moments, which most of us have, like, it's no secret. Everyone has. I was going through some, the last couple years, and, running for office was something I certainly had on my bucket list and really wanted to do, but it was always to me about being in the right community, being at the right moment. And I never thought about being the right me, like being the person that I wanted to be, the person that could show up for my community in an authentic and real way.
Yeah.
And I think the decision to run, like, especially in the beginning, was one of the loneliest decisions I ever made, because you start running and no one knows who you are. No one says, "I love you, Sarah Batchu," on the street.
Right.
And you don't have money yet. You can't hire people. You have to motivate every single person that is going to help you to do it for free.
Yeah.
Which most people can't in New York City. It's very hard to do things for free. And the first 6 months were really tough. I thought, do I really want to do this? Is this for me? And I'm so glad there were people who really stepped up for me in that moment and said, like, you are the right person. Like, you will break through. And, I honestly just gave it time, a lot of therapy, like, shout out to my therapist, Angela. She's great. And it really got me to the point of remembering why I was doing this, who I was doing it for, because it isn't me. It's the community that I love. And realizing that I am a person who can show up for that community. And it may be isolating at times. People may not know your name because you don't have the same name as some creepy guys that have done bad things, or you may not be a creepy guy who's
Yeah,
done bad things.
right.
But you still have merit, and just telling myself that over and over again and really willing it into existence. I'm a big believer in manifesting.
Yeah.
It really has turned out to be something so much bigger than me when I look at how many volunteers are showing up over and over again, when I see that my team, is recruiting shift after shift after shift, and there are people I've never even met before coming into the office and saying, hey, I'm here to knock doors.
Right.
That's when you realize, oh, this was the boldest thing you could be doing, to stick through it when it is tough.
Yeah.
And to keep going.
Keep going. And that's on boldness. That's so good. Well, thank you so much for coming on my podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I had so much fun interviewing you, getting to know you a little bit better. I can't wait to vote on June 24th, which is my birthday month and Pride Month.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's a great month.
That's a good
auspicious month.
Yes, it's so good. Is there anything else you'd like to say to the listeners before we close out?
I think, do your form of boldness every day. Don't let them stop you. The haters are always going to be there. They always show up. And get involved. Like I said earlier, don't wait to be activated. The boldest thing you can do is to start now. And I, of course, hope that you vote. If you live in District 2, I said those neighborhoods. We also have a website, sarahbatchu.nyc. We'll drop that in the caption. If you do vote in our neighborhood, or even if you live in another neighborhood, get involved. Don't miss this opportunity to have a whole new city leadership ready to represent you in 2026.
Yeah, amazing. Well, everybody, listeners, watchers, I really want to thank you for listening and watching. I hope you have a great day, an even better week, and may we all find the boldness to chase our dreams. And we'll be right back.